Welcome back to Palatable Politics, where we take the complexity out of politics and make it palatable for you. Today, with your host, me, Thapelo Masilela, we will be discussing international relations, how it impacts you, how it impacts me, and the role we can play in international relations. Today, we'll be joined by our guest, who is a father, a leader in society, someone that's also on social media, so who can respond to your tweets. Mr. Alvin in his capacity as Deputy Minister of DIRCO, which is the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Thapelo, for having me, and thank you very much to the viewers of Palatable Politics. Quite intriguing, the terminology that you are using.
No, thank you for that. It took quite a bit of creativity and thinking to get something that would be able to attract the youth. But now, on politics, voting is obviously a very important aspect of it. Can you tell us the first time you voted? How did it feel? What emotions? Where were you? What day was it?
Yeah, I'm obviously one of the people that have gravitated to middle age, so I'm no more a young person. But I voted when I was young, in 1994, actually. I was one of the last people to vote because I had other responsibilities in terms of, ensuring that there's mobilization of the people actually to the voting station. And I thought my vote was an important instrument through which I validate my future and the future of everyone, in my family. So it was a validation because I knew that that vote was going to mean something as we ushered in a new South Africa.
Okay. It's very touching. I could feel it. Okay, so now back to the international relations aspect of it. How do you now link the international relations to the politics in society?
Yeah, I think what we must do, Thapelo, is to simplify it. The first issue that we do is international relations and cooperation on behalf of the president, because remember, the president is a custodian of South Africa's foreign policy. We advance our national interests when we implement our foreign policy imperatives. So what we do, we ensure that we look at opportunities for foreign direct investment to enable us then to grow the economy, to reduce unemployment, particularly youth unemployment, and to negate on poverty and inequality. So that is the first component. The second component, of course, is to ensure that we deepen our foreign policy, objectives. One is to ensure that we validate Pan-Africanism. So when we engage other countries, we look at ourselves first and foremost as an African state. So we are intertwined, we're interwoven amongst all other 55 African states of the AU. Secondly, we look at global solidarity with what you call your underdeveloped South. For example, in sub-Saharan Africa, you have 48 what we call less developed countries, of which 34 is in sub-Saharan Africa. And we then use at our disposal our resources to ensure that we establish very concrete relationships with your underdeveloped South. Your third policy priority is, of course, to ensure that we solidify relations between your underdeveloped South as a country of the South and your more industrialized North, for example, your America, your Europe, etc. And the last one is to enhance our participation in multilateralism, in particular global governance apex organizations such as United Nations, World Health Organization, World Trade Organizations, etc. And everything we do with a singular thought to ensure we advance the interests of the South African society, and in particular young women, young people, young women at the general level.
Okay, all right. No, that was a very insightful, in-depth educational response. Thank you for that. But let's just dissect it a bit. Firstly, you spoke about the part where it's delegated powers from the president. Can you walk us through your journey as to from being an activist, like our viewers, just a person, a citizen, to where you are now as a deputy minister? Can you walk us through that journey?
Yeah, well, remember, I once upon a time was also a student that have studied, that have actually graduated, and I was then fortunate to get the opportunity in a non-governmental organization to work within the policy and research space, and thereafter I was then elected, on the provincial legislature, for example, of the Northern Cape, and after that I was deployed to deputy minister position. Of course, remember, DIRCO and this particular position, it's about policy enhancement. It's not about new policy development, because the South African state is certain what its foreign policy objectives are. What you then bring as someone from a different generation, and I must make this point, Tapelo, generational mix is critical to ensure we have a more certain future in South Africa. If you look at, I am from a different generation, for example, than Minister of DIRCO, Dr. Pando. But what she brings to the party is the experience, the knowledge, the know-how, and also mentorship to ensure that as someone from a different generation than herself, I'm able to aptly execute the responsibilities that actually she has given to me. So once you have a complementary relationship where, the elders in society appreciate the centrality of the younger generation, you then develop what you call certainty in terms of the future that South Africa in 2030 wishes to achieve. And for me, that is a critical aspect to ensure the critical mass of young people continue to be mobilized. If we have more elders in society, whether in business, in the private sector, in government, that actually make it a deliberate task to engage in a mentorship process, that you will then bring about what we call a youth dividend. You'll bring in a youth dividend that are aptly capacitated with key technical abilities and with the mentorship that has been imparted from the more eldership of within society. So I think there's a complementary role that the elders must play in terms of harnessing, youth capability.
Okay, all right. So, once again, a lot of insightful information. I will come back to the part of the poverty, unemployment, and inequality, but I wanted to touch on so you say that the elder generation essentially provide the direction, the experience, the mentorship. There's your side, which is compensating that and ensuring the generational mix. The youth, what role do they come and what do they play? What's their active role in that?
Yeah, remember, young people bring energy to any occasion. So that is the significant contribution that young people, make. For example, in South Africa, young people is those that has been declared to be between 18 and 35. So anyone beyond 35, it's moving in the mainstream to middle age, So what young people bring, it's energy. Remember, the important issue, young people are not homogeneous. They are not necessarily identical in outlook. It's a strata. You get young people that is unemployed, young graduates, young single parents. You get youth that are young but that are parents themselves. So your challenges are different, but the singular purpose of young people is to energize the outlook of society, to do things different. For example, Tapelo, we are not going to be reimagined that post-COVID-19 pandemic, that we'll be able to build an economy that will realize 6% growth in accordance to the National Development Plan's targets of 2030. But we'll only be able to do that when you have young people in the mainstream in the economic sector that actually relook in terms of our economic thinking, young people that brings value to manufacturing, young people that brings thought process in terms of industrialization, because I think there is a consensus amongst all of us in government that South Africa, the past 3 to 4 years, has been really on a path of deindustrialization. Now, what we need now is our economic stimulus package under President Ramaphosa have started to ensure that we inject into the economy significant variables. But those variables, it's primarily based on economic rethinking. And the agents of this new economy that we're envisaging, it must be young people, because what we're trying to do is to ensure that beyond a period of 2030, there should be a certainty of economic prosperity in South Africa. And you remember, Tapelo, that, for example, the African Agenda 2063 speaks about the construct of inclusive prosperity. So what we need, the only way how South Africa substantively will change and do things different is if you have a front line of young thinking, of young intellectuals, of young people that are possessing both theoretical university education and technical TVET type of education to actually ensure that, we bring about a different economy than the one that we had, for example, in the past years.
Okay, all right, no, thank you for that. In your answer, you spoke about the unemployment, the economic growth. And obviously, as a country, we have the triple challenge of poverty, unemployment, inequality. From a DIRCO perspective, I know you've mentioned that partnerships, like you said, the WTO, etc. And your line would be more strategic. How is that now all infused into a practical way that affects the youth, where Steve there and I can actually feel and get involved?
Yeah. Okay, no, I think it's quite an interesting question. Firstly, there's a number of different components. We look at what we call cultural diplomacy, where there's exchange programs between different countries. Remember, for example, we have a bilateral agreement with Netherlands, with Poland, with Romania, where we are then able to ensure that young graduates or young people that wishes to study in a different country, internationally, there's that exchange programs actually that we built in. Remember what it does, it's not about only accumulation of different experience, but it's also accumulation of different type of the cultural component of how other people in other continents of the world actually live. And I'm raising it, Tapelo, because I think it's quite key and critical that our young people need to understand why we say South Africa is still a developing country. When you go to Norway, you go to Finland, you understand what is it to be in a developed nation, where you virtually absolutely have no poverty in those type of countries compared to our country that still are seen as the apex of prosperity, for example, in Africa. Secondly, at the bilateral level, economically, young people need to understand, for example, we pioneered as the South African government with all other states what we call your African Continental Free Trade Agreement. That agreement, Tapelo, will ensure that 90% of all goods that are traded between South Africa, Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, South Africa, Egypt, Morocco, etc., are free of tariffs. What it means, remember, tariffs is a key issue. It's an impediment, in fact, to trade. So this new international agreement that DIRCO with its other partners have negotiated will ensure that there's a reduction of tariffs. So you'll be able to import or export to Egypt with 90% less of tariffs attached. So what it means, the cost of doing business and the value of which you will be able to sell your product as a young person have actually, have actually increased. So that is one of the most immediate instruments that we have put at the disposal of our young people. Secondly, we have said that if people want to do foreign direct investment in South Africa, one of the preconditions is what we call industrialization, local industrialization. We want to see factories coming up again in South Africa. So when we negotiate with India to bring Tata, we want to see a Tata factory here in South Africa. That factory must be able to ensure the young people that have been skilled at TVET colleges in motor mechanics are employed on that manufacturing side. So that's why we have said where young people theoretically they have not a strong academic acumen in terms of academic studies, but they have a passion to develop their technical capabilities. You have your TVET colleges to do that. And I think that is why we encourage it. We fund some of the TVET colleges, for example, in Ekurhuleni. It gets funded through partnership with a number of other countries, and embassies that are basically in South Africa. So that is our value proposition to young people. We always ask, what is in this bilateral relations that will benefit young people?
Yeah, all right. So you've touched on the importance of youth getting involved, which is your Steve and Dombi Tabo. You've also touched on the role which they can play in terms of providing energy. But now, how does the demographics of our situation, which I guess about a third of our population is the youth. But now, how does the youth participation in SA compare with that of our counterparts in Africa, in the East, and the West?
Yeah, remember, I think the total number of young people in South Africa is 17 million. So you have 17 million young people. That is obviously highly conscious, but it doesn't mean that consciousness, Tapelo, translate to political participation. And I think that is a major cause of concern, because up until the majority of that 17 million young people classified as those between 18 and 35 decide to participate in politics, exercise their democratic right to vote, we are not going to see the leadership of the country to become younger. For example, in Finland, the prime minister there is 35 years old. In New Zealand, the prime minister is 39 years old. In Ukraine, you have young leaders. And I'm saying, if we compare the aging profile of the South African leadership to that of, for example, Europe, it's not comparable. There you have really what you call a population dividend, where young people have found themselves in the mainstream and in the echelon, the higher echelons of your government and societal structures. Of course, I'm raising it in the context that we are African country. If you look at the profile elsewhere in Africa of leaders, your heads of states average 70 years of age. And we think it's a problem because it does not guarantee a mentorship process. Because, for example, ideally, you should have a difference of components of young people that are located, for example, in the cabinet. You must have those that are really young, between 18 and 35. That there should be a member of cabinet in that age group. Then you have a different age group, those between 35 and 40, 45 and 50, etc. And I think there is a limitation, but there is a commitment from our president to ensure that he pioneers youth development and the entry of young people in the echelons of politics. We have seen it, for example, now with the nominations of ward candidates, for example, that you have more young people that expressly have indicated their interest. So we compare comparatively well with other African states, but in terms of your more industrialized north, we don't compare well, because there in the north that is more industrialized, where you have young people that are leading your transformation processes, where young people are excited and are leaders of private sector, of your business enterprises. You don't have that in South Africa. And I'm saying that up until we have more young people in leadership structures in South Africa, we are going to continue to experience a limitation of energy and of innovation, because it's young people, Tapelo, that brings innovation to government programs, to private sector initiatives, etc. So young people, I think there is a acclimation about their centrality.
Okay, all right. We won't go into the part as to which of those age categories you fall into. But now we've said that we need to essentially get youth in to participate more. I mean, at one point we will get to that stage of having much younger youth leading the country. But in the meantime, we have to get them to a position where they are ready to be taken into cabinet and ready to participate. So my question to you is, for the viewer at home, Kifilwe, someone that has just studied international relations or that has interest to go into international relations, how do they move from that step of, okay, I've graduated, to the point of being ready to lead the country?
Yeah, look, remember in DIRCO we have what we call a cadet program that were established to ensure that young graduates from universities are actually exposed to what we call the practical components of your diplomatic world. So we have that type of a cadet program. And of course, the important issue is there is a choice. You get a choice where you say, look, I will want to have a particular interest within the state, within government structures, where I would want to, for example, one day see myself as a career diplomat, where you work in an embassy in a foreign country. But then there's also those young people that look at your non-state partners. For example, your UN, United Nations and sister development agencies, where you have quite unique opportunities depending on your area of focus. If you are on food security, there's an agency dealing with that. Economically, there's an agency dealing with it. So there's a range of development agencies of the United Nations that young people can actually apply their trade to work. And then, of course, what some people have not necessarily realized, Tapelo, is that every single multinational company in South Africa have what you call a person, or it has in that company, responsible for international trade and cooperation. So there's quite huge opportunities, that government have laid bare, and opportunities, of course, evidently, that must be taken up by private sector. And private sector needs young people with particular expertise in terms of, for example, if you go to a market like in Kenya, you must know what is the different economic sectors in Kenya to be able to do trade. When you go to the ASEAN economies, you must know, for example, in Singapore, in Indonesia, that is, the biggest Muslim population in the world. What is the opportunities? There's massive opportunities for abattoirs that are Muslim accredited, etc. Young people must take those opportunities. So I'm raising it in the context that the energy that I've spoken about is premised on the fact that there is those opportunities, and you need young people that are proactive, that are business-minded, with the entrepreneurial spirit to capitalize on these opportunities that government have actually put out.
Okay, all right. So now, obviously, there's a whole lot of information abroad, which, if we have access to, do open up opportunities. But I mean, obviously, we need to find out about it first. How would you say we can use social media, especially because I see you are on Twitter, you are on LinkedIn? How can we use social media to, one, get the information to the viewers, but also to have them engage and share the programs like the cadet program?
Yes, Tapelo, look, let's first agree that, institutions such as yourself, pellet politics, must be used as a change agent in that type of a process. We will be able to share, obviously, information at the disposal in terms of scholarships via the higher education department. We'll be able to share opportunities within the economic bilateral agreements that is available from the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. So that is what we must be able to do, so that we feed or provide the necessary platforms. And I think a partnership between various government agencies with a institution such as yours, I think will be able to ensure that we close further the gap. So the information is there. It needs to be dissected. It must be simplified so that young people must be able to say, look, I'm an unemployed statistician. Where is the opportunities for unemployed statistician in government or in the private sector? And your type of organization such as yours will be able to bring about that type of opportunities for the unemployed graduate. And then you have what you call your grants that are available in government, your economic grants for industrialists, etc. What is the requirements to access a grant from the IDC? So there is ways where we can say, look, this is the grant, this is the requirements, and then we have then a mutual exercise where young people engage in relation to, is there any difficulties to access a grant? For example, other grants have said, for you to able to access it, you must also make a equitable contribution. Sometimes young people don't have it. We must then be able to say, no, if a young person must do a own contribution, can the National Youth Development Agency then intervene at that space? So I'm saying, I think there's goodwill from government, Tapelo, there's goodwill. What we need is more institutions such as yourself to work with government and with the private sector in terms of unlocking that type of opportunities for our young people.
The information that you spoke of, the programs, you're saying that after the African Free Trade Agreement, where can our viewers there find them? Where can they access this information and the entry points?
Yes, look, I think what our young entrepreneurs must look at is obviously spend a lot of time in the website of the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. because that's the lead department that are packaging all your grant opportunities and economic opportunities. And it's actually a department that deals with referrals. So that will be your lead department. The second agency is, of course, your National Youth Development Agency that are specifically established to engineer, young people's space within the economic mainstream. So those are your two pivotal government bodies and institutions to look at the plight of young people economically. But remember, your higher education and training department looks at your further education and training opportunities. So what we don't want, Tapelo, we don't want young people that are unemployed, that are not skilled. Any young people that is unemployed must be skilled through your TVET colleges. And I'm raising this point because it's not all young people that will be able to go to university necessarily because of what I've said, the academic acumen. But all young people will be able to utilize their hands to ply their trade. And I think your TVET colleges offers free type of technical training and to upskill our young people, because the more young people we have as boiler makers, more young people as plumbers, more young people as carpentry, those are people that on an everyday basis have a job here in South Africa, most of them, because every day there's a plumbing problem in your household. You call, it's not a young person that are coming out, it's always an elder that are coming up. So we want young people to be opportunistic moving forward. You have a government with goodwill in this country, and I think I can't stress it more when President Ramaphosa indicated, we want to present a future that is certain, where you have not have young people unemployed, sitting at home, idling in the streets. We want young people to become active agents in this part of economic recovery South Africa wants to engage on.
All right. So now, in closing, we all know about politicians. There's this conception out there that serious people, always with a tie, always with a suit. Can you tell us about who Alvin Bottas is outside of the deputy minister? Who are you? What do you do on weekends? What passions do you have? If you weren't in politics, what would you be doing?
Yeah, well, I'm in politics, so there's very little I can do about it. Look, I think, Tapelo, the first issue that you must appreciate, that anyone must appreciate, is that the position that you are in is normally a very temporary position. It's what you call, you have been allocated certain responsibilities. You must ask yourself, tomorrow, if you are not in this position, will anything change in terms of your character, in terms of who you are, in terms of your own value proposition, to your people? So who I am is just to ensure that I present something of value to my next of kin. I'm an activist. Che Guevara said, when you tremble with indignation every time an injustice is perpetuated against the people, then you are a comrade of mine. And that is who I am. Someone that says, where there's injustice, I want to ensure that we bring about social justice in this country. I want to ensure that there's no unemployment, there's less poverty and inequality. And that is actually what drives me, nothing else, because ultimately, like I've said, it's about your love for your next of kin, for your neighbor, for your people in society. So I think that is the contribution, and I am inspired by, the Cuban revolutionary Che Guevara. So where there's a problem affecting our people, I want to be seen to be there. Whether I'm there as a deputy minister, whether I'm there as a social activist, I want to be there. And I'm raising it even for young people. We can't be nonchalant. We can't be lethargic in our approach in terms of our contribution. where there's a problem in society, young people are supposed to rise to the occasion. And I think that is a mantra that some of us have inculcated, over many years of being social activists. So I'm a social activist. I'm not a political leader. I'm not a government leader. My paramount characteristic should be I'm a social activist.
Okay. All right. Now, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to mention a word, and in one sentence, you must say what comes to mind. Okay. So when you hear the word a role model, when you role model.
Madiba, Nelson Mandela, yeah.
All right. And when you hear the term Drake, what?
Chive. Yeah.
Okay. And voting?
Responsibility.
Okay. All right. Viewers, guests, thank you very much. You've heard responsibility, voting, find out more about your government, about your country. This is a platform that we are using with our guests, like our Deputy Minister. Thank you for tuning in. See you next same time, same place next week. Good evening.